take your seats. We're right at 6, actually 6:01. I just want to be, respectful of everybody's time. With that, so I'm just going to start off really briefly, and then I'll go from there. We're going to give you a presentation. It's not very long, and then there's going to be a Q&A session following that. So that's the format we've been utilizing. It's worked very well. My name is Fausto Burrell. I am the Public Works Director with the Town of Marana for public, and with me is Heidi Lashes.
I'm the Capital Improvement Program Division Manager.
So, technology's been nice to us so far, but we've never used this format. So there's a smart TV, and we've actually never presented here. So bear with us a little bit. Oh yes, and I just want to make sure everybody's aware that this is being recorded. The reason why is we do want to document this. And I'd also like to back up a step and tell you thank you for coming, because this is the intent of this endeavor. We want the public engagement. We want you here. We want you expressing your thoughts, your concerns, engagement. And so as part of that, we really do appreciate your time. So the purpose of this, why are we doing this? Well, first and foremost is funding. We need funds to construct a bridge over the Cortaro Railroad. Specifically, we are working on what's called a grant, an RCE grant. Heidi will get into the details of exactly what that is, but we have a railroad that's adjacent to the interstate. We have an interstate that we also have an interchange that needs to be reconstructed, but those two need to go hand in hand. So as part of those funding, the town is looking at all potential resources that we can, and there is what's called the Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant that we are pursuing with this. Also, again, your role is to provide feedback on the proposed project. With that, I'm going to let Heidi take over.
So as far as feedback goes, you'll see on your tables and probably when you came in, there's a QR code. If you could use that, there's a survey, and at the end will be a website which you can also get to our survey to give us some more feedback. Wrong way. All right, so as Fausto talked about, we're looking at a railroad crossing elimination grant. So this is a federal grant, so it's from the FRA, it's the Federal Railroad Administration. What they're looking to do is enhance railroad safety. So one of the things that we have is an at-grade crossing that we're looking to eliminate any vehicular or pedestrian traffic that could come in contact with the trains. This grant is extremely competitive. So we actually attended a boot camp, which one of the things was coming out to you all early before we even had funding to gain all of your input, what your concerns are, whether it being, you ride a bike and there's no bike lanes. Do you walk your dog and there's no sidewalks nearby? You go to work on either side and you're stopped by a train. Those are the things we want to hear. And also, if you're here and you're a business owner, we want to hear from you too. What impacts do you have? The RCE grant, some of the things that we're going to talk, they want to hear from us too is on the sustainability, which would be adding the sidewalks, equity, and strength. And one of the things the town has to do is come up with a 20% match. So we've actually been earmarked $10 million already from the state. So that's going to be our match, and our ask is going to be $40 million.
How much? Sorry.
40 million. The total project cost for an interchange like this is roughly 200 million in today's dollars. So what's the problem? You all probably drive through it every day. You kind of know what the problem is, right? A lot of it's railroad safety, disconnecting communities from the east side and the west side. You kind of have to wait sometimes. Could be 5 minutes because you get there at the end of the train. Could be 15 minutes.
Keep going.
They could stop on the tracks. It could be longer than that, right? So,
No, I got where one was going, and as soon as that one passed, another one was coming the other way.
exactly. So when you're sitting there too, then you get decreased air quality. All that exhaust that's in the air. So then, like we said before, we also have absence of sidewalks and bike lanes for those folks trying to get across. So we're looking at constructing, like Fausto said, a new bridge over the railroad, which would also have to go over I-10. We're looking at traffic impacts, different alternatives, but the really good thing, which you'll see in the next slide, is that we have a lot of good alternatives to this area that are close by that'll help us, which Some of you may use already today because you don't want to go through it anyway. Construction is lasting approximately 2 years. That's been every other project that we've seen along I-10. And then access, like we said, to businesses is going to be affected. So business owners, we want to hear from you on how we can help
Are you waiting for questions at the end or during?
at the end,
Okay.
if you could. Thank you. So alternative routes. We have an interchange to the north. We have Twin Peaks. To the south, we have Ina Road. And then we have kind of our north-south or angled Silver Bell and Thornydale Road, which will help when there's the interchanges under construction. You can at least have some accessibility around the area. Like I said, the current estimate for the project is about $200 million. The state contribution is $10 million that has been earmarked for us for this project. So we're looking to ask for another $40 million with this RCE, Railroad Crossing Elimination Grant, with the total project cost right now of $50 million. One other thing, we're talking about funding sources, is one of the town's biggest asks in the next RTA Next, which is a voter-approved initiative. So all of you are voters. So in order for us to receive the $100 million, we have to have the RTA Next. Before we get to questions, I'm actually going to have Steve come up. He is here with RTA to give a little bit more on the RTA and answer any questions that you may have with the RTA, and then we'll open it up for the rest of it.
I will be super brief because this is about Town of Marana and Cortaro Interchange. But my name is Steve Hoffman. I'm with the Pima County Regional Transportation Authority. For those of you who have never heard of that, Pima County Regional Transportation Authority is not part of any local government. It's a statutorily authorized government entity that does transportation projects just in Pima County. But every local government, including Town of Marana, is a member of basically our board of directors. So we do regional transportation planning. If you saw that sort of poster board that I had on the front when you come in, just think about this. We have about $50 million that comes in on an annual basis to Pima County between state and federal resources. The Pima County Regional Transportation Authority is funded by a half-cent sales tax that is voter approved by you guys. We were approved in 2006 for 20 years. We expire in 2026, so if we don't get reauthorization, we go away between now and 2026. But that half-cent sales tax raises about $119 million a year. So just think about that. That half-cent sales tax that you guys vote for, and you get to control what projects get funded with that, represents about 2/3 of all the money that we have available for transportation improvements in Pima County. And as you heard today, in the RTA Next that will be on the ballot in May of 2025, we anticipate having about $100 million, which is about half of the funding for this project, coming through RTA Next, but that only happens if the voters approve and pass RTA Next in May of 2025. I am happy to talk to you afterwards if you have any questions about the RTA and what's going on, but we've been in existence for 17 years now. We've done over 1,000 different transportation projects over that 17 years all across Pima County. I mean, here in Marana, Twin Peaks Interchange was one of the projects that was voter approved and done by the RTA. The Ina Road overpass over the railroad tracks was one of the RTA projects that was approved by the voters and taken care of by Marana and the RTA. So I will leave that to you, but if you have any questions, I will be here afterwards. But like you heard tonight, if we don't get reapproved between now and 2026, that $119 million, 2/3 of our funding for transportation projects goes away overnight. And again, that's a significant portion of the anticipated funding for this particular project. So happy to talk to you afterwards, but thank you for having me here. I appreciate you guys coming out tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
Can I ask Steve a question?
Yes.
Yeah, Steve, and for those who don't know about the RTA, or maybe a lot of you, this is very important in what he's saying. The town of Marana has used RTA funds for Twin Peaks, for Cortaro years ago, and for Ina. And if it wasn't for the RTA, we wouldn't have had those. So it's RTA, it's ADOT funding, it's Marana funding, as our staff pointed out, but really you need to pay attention with the RTA because there are factions out there that will be against the RTA. And if that happens, please tell me if I'm wrong, because I've been wrong. The half-cent sales tax goes away.
Roxanne, you're right. The other thing to keep in mind, and again, I will not take a whole lot of time, but the thing that you have to know about RTA funds is you guys, as a community, get to pick the projects that we fund. So the RTA Next that they're talking about, you guys get to vote on the plan, and you get to vote on the funding of the plan. And we are statutorily required to only spend that money on the projects that you guys approve. And that money is the most flexible transportation money that we have. The state money and the federal money is great and it helps us out, but it comes with a lot of strings. This is the only money that we have as a region that we get to pick the projects, and we can spend it on whatever you guys approve in this plan. It's the most flexible money that we have. There are many, many projects that we've done that could not be funded through state or federal money and could only be funded through voter-approved RTA money. So it's going to be a big deal when it's on the ballot in May of 2025.
And to be
Thank you,
clear,
Steve.
Steve, that 119 million,
I'd like to make just a quick comment to follow up on this lady over here. I've lived here a long time, and I can tell you, having lived elsewhere, this RTA has done a wonderful job. Really a blessing to have something like this. So thank you.
I'm sorry, I started with you. And Steve, can I make a comment on that 109, to be clear? The 119 million isn't what we get. To make it clear, we get some of that money. We need to share that so people understand it's not, we get all the 119, they have projects,
But
so.
didn't you
Correct.
say that we could get 100 million can come from RTA for this project? Did I misunderstand that?
The net RT Next over the 20-year period, that if the voters approve it, will generate about $2.34 billion over that 20 years. So the 100 million is part of that.
Okay, because I'm going to ask funding questions later. I just want to be clear on that.
We appreciate that, and we're getting ready to get into question session. Really briefly, before I start, I want to acknowledge some of our staff that is here, and also because you may have some questions that they can help out with directly. On the right, we have Dion Swartz. She's our traffic manager, so I'm pretty sure there might be some traffic-related questions. So either during this, I will do my best to answer, or afterwards, she may jump in. The lady over here, Roxanne Ziegler, she is our council member, and we appreciate you coming and also the questions you've had. Vic Hathaway, she's with our communications group. She's doing our recording. And then Jennifer Flood, she's the Deputy Director of Public Works. And Christine Byler is also the one with our community services, and she's helped set this up. So thank you very much, Christine. With that, we are open to questions, so please ask away. Yes, sir.
So I've listened to the podcast and I've heard you and Terry on a couple of them. A couple of questions I have, and I know it might be hard to answer. What alternatives are you guys looking at? Because it's a horrible intersection. I mean, you guys get a tough time, right? When do you think you're going to start? And hopefully you're going to take into account when you decide, whenever, to redo Silverville, because this got delayed, the section from Ina south, right?
Correct.
Hopefully those won't coincide and we end up with, two things major going on at the same time.
So I'll answer your question and as you have asked them. So I think you mentioned alternatives. We have looked at some potential alternatives. It's
Can you
landed.
share those?
We've done some well, let me back up a step and make sure everybody's clear. When we're talking about I-10 and the Cortaro Interchange, that is an ADOT infrastructure. That is not actually the town of Marana's. However, their impacts on our town is extensive, obviously, along with the railroad that goes through our town. It's a benefit, but also it's a challenge when we have to cross those major infrastructure. So when we talk about alternatives, there are alternatives out there that ADOT has done, and that's just looking at different types of interchanges that can be placed. I can tell you that the one that's been landed on is putting on a traditional diamond interchange, which is similar to what you see at Ina and at Twin Peaks. So your next question was
You say
your
orientation is
timing.
basically just raising up over the existing? You're not-
So it would be lowering the interstate and raising over, because as Heidi mentioned, the proximity to the railroad is very close. And obviously we can't go up and down and back over.
Right.
They're right next to each other. So the plan would be to fly over both, the interstate and the railroad. To answer your question for timing, I just want to make it clear, we are way in front of this. This is very infant stages. Right now, what we're doing is specifically, this discussion is for the RCE grant, the railroad crossing elimination. Again, as I just mentioned, those two projects are married together. It's all one, but we're trying for a grant to help us fund some of it, which specifically is where the impacts of the railroad. With that being said, you know, we're still quite a ways away when we get to that point. As Steve mentioned, the RTA Next initiative, 2026 is when the current RTA we are in expires. The 2027 is when the next initiative begins. Cortaro TI is our #1 ask in that initiative. So right now, that is the town's #1 ask. And again, mind you, that is an ADOT infrastructure, but again, it impacts us so much, and we know, and we're aware of the challenges with that interchange that we asked on behalf of ADOT. And in fact, our #2 ask is Tangerine Interchange. So the interchanges are very important to us as we continue to grow, as you know, our town continues to evolve. But those are our first asks. To give you a timing, I really can't at this point. Our intent is to put our best foot forward to receive this grant, and then it'll allow us to move into some of the elements you have to do way in advance, the planning, the design concept type documents, the environmental, the archaeological, then into design. With the hopes when the next RTA initiative kicks in, if successful, we would be really ready to construct within that first period. So in reality, we would look, and again, when I say first period, it's a 20-year broken up into 4 5-year periods. So we're looking at the 2027 and 2032 time frame of being able to construct in there. If, again, there's a lot of things that need to align for that. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So one of the things that you have on our, sorry.
All right.
Is the Silverbill, or not Silverbill, sorry, Twin Peaks as a route to the alternate there. So at Apartment though, with all of the new construction and everything, Linda Vista Apartment is right now a stop sign, and it's heavily impacted even now where constructions, you know, are being filled in that type of thing. So in the preliminary work that you're talking about, is that going to be one of the things that will be addressed and put a light there to help with the increase of traffic and that type of thing to include Cortaro and Twin Peaks?
So the area you're talking about is actually the border between ourselves and Pima County, and that intersection in question is actually under their jurisdiction. When we talk about other alternatives, but I appreciate the question bringing this up, we want to emphasize that we're going to do all that we can to plan and to minimize impacts on businesses, but there will be impacts. I mean, this is a major endeavor, major undertaking, and it's a 2-year process. But what we can do to minimize the time of when things have to go offline. But the other thing we wanted to point out is there's other options. I know in previous meetings, people talk about doing a big U-turn. They go down to Ina and flip around. That is something that would potentially still be in play during this construction. Again, it's too early to say, but you have a fully improved interchange to the south and you have a fully improved interchange to the north. We're in a lot better place at this point in time than when we did Ina, because Ina, you didn't have that in place. You had Orange Grove to the south, and you had Cortaro to the north, which we already know Cortaro probably wasn't a good alternative to utilize. Now the state is currently working on I-10 to the south, and by the time we get to the point of doing this, Orange Grove will be improved. And there'll be some other access points in place. So we will be in a better position. But again, I do want to say that there won't be any impacts, because obviously that's not the case. There will be some impacts. We're just going to do all we can to minimize it. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
This gentleman mentioned Silverville. I didn't hear when is Silverville going to be widened? I've been hearing for years it's going to go to 4 lanes. And when's that? Is that anywhere on the? I know part of that is county. I get that. Marana wants to have a little chunk of it.
Correct.
This goes to county. But is there a town and county partnership to widen that to El Camino del Cerro?
Actually, it's tied to the current RTA program that we are in, and it is at the final stage of that. However, funding of the first initiative has been tight, and so right now that project is looking at overlapping between the end of the first RTA and RTA Next, or RTA 2, if you will. So again, if that initiative is successful, that's where that project lands. If it's not, then there's still, but yes, that is a project that's on the books. It's between ourselves, Pima County, and the city of Tucson, that entire stretch.
My other question, if I may, is from a funding standpoint. First of all, the current ADOT program on project on I-10, is the Orange Grove portion of that, is any RTA money going to that since it's in the town of Marana or not?
So for clarity for everybody, I'm sorry, were you still?
No, there's more, but if you could address that first, that'd be good.
So for clarity for everybody, when they look at the region, it's everything within the Pima County area. So ADOT actually has a seat at the table for RTA funding. In the case of that project, I am not aware of RTA funding as part of that. However, we are not part of that program. Jennifer, are you aware of any? Or?
No.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. And then the other question to Steve's point about the 100 million can or may come from RTA if RTA passes for in the 26th election. So the next question is, that gets us halfway there. I understand that the grant with the 20% down, that 20% is hopefully projected to come from the federal grant and state grant, correct?
We have 10 million currently. The state did give us 10 million earmarked for the Cortaro TI.
Right.
We're looking to flip that 10 million into 50 million with the 2080 grant. So our match would be the 10 million, 40 million would be the remainder. So yes, there is still a delta of 50 million, and we are aware of that, and we are going to pursue all funding resources available to us as we proceed or continue to work on this project. However, keep in mind, when the town moved forward with the Twin Peaks endeavor, when they moved forward with Heiner Road, funding wasn't there available right when they started. They started planning, design to move forward to figure out exactly where the funding's come. I'm not trying to tell you to say, this is part of it. We have done this before. We have been successful. Part of the issue that we're having is just the price point in today's dollars. Those projects cost less than half of what we're currently talking about right now. Part of it is just the nature of the cost of materials and just as we've all seen the inflation that we go to the grocery stores and how much material and products are costing today, even from 2 or 3 years ago. That's part of the challenge. So that's why we're looking at other type of funding sources that we haven't done traditionally as a town. We really haven't pursued federal funding at this magnitude just because we haven't been, $200 million project. We haven't really been faced with that. Again, keep in mind too that ADOT is part of the equation. Cortaro Road is currently not on their 10-year or their long-term plan. You won't find it there. However, we have had discussions with ADOT. We continue to have discussions with ADOT, and they understand. They see Marana. They know we're growing. They know that we are continuing to grow. We've been very vocal about that. And they have actually had good discussions that they're starting to understand that. However, keeping that in mind, ADOT is still looking at a network that crosses the state. So where their funding can be utilized is something that, they have to take everything into account. Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask kind of the obvious question that I think probably everybody in here is assuming. Is this project more difficult than, say, Twin Peaks, Ida? It just seems to me inherently, with all the business right up against, the interstate and the railroad tracks, that this is more challenging, or is it similar?
Challenging is probably the better word. Maybe not difficult. The design is going to be similar, but there's some moving parts we have to contend with. The current preliminary design that's on the books that ADOT has in a document that's called Design Concept Report, DCR. It does give us a very high-level design of what could potentially, how this product could look at the end. As part of that, they are actually shifting the interchange about 100 feet to the east. So that's going to take a little bit of that curvature out of it, because as you know, there's kind of a sharp turn there at Cortaro, if you look at it from like an aerial point of view. There's some challenges, there's some property acquisition, but again, as we get into more design and all that, those things can be eliminated. And some of the things we also looked at is today's designs, there's a little bit more options than what was looked at that time frame. Some of the grades that you can utilize are a little bit steeper, if you will, so that it can kind of minimize the footprint. So there's a lot of opportunities there, but it's still, yes, it will be a challenging project.
What about McDonald, Burger King, that right now?
Excuse me, I'm sorry?
Burger King and McDonald, is that gonna get shut down?
Again, we're not into the complete design, but from the looks of it, it may shift it to the east, and that may impact where the existing Burger King is. However, that being said, I don't know if you've read recently, but Burger King's changing their whole business structure, and they've been shutting down a lot of Burger Kings across the nation, going to a different route. I don't know how that plays into this particular Burger King, but the one at Home Depot recently shut down kind of suddenly on us, if you've noticed that. There was a question from over here? Yes, sir.
I think that for most people who live around here, there's a serious question of trust because the RTA welched on fixing Silverbell. I mean, we voted for that 20 years ago. They had 20 years to figure out how to get Silverbell fixed, and nothing happened. The Silverbell situation has deteriorated. It deteriorates on a daily basis. Now, I realize you're not responsible for the RTA, but I have a Marana question. When Marana rebuilt Silverbell from Ina north to Cortaro, we were told it was going to be a desert parkway. And we didn't get a desert parkway, we got an airport runway. There's no median, there's little access, there's no landscaping. All they did was lay asphalt. So, my question to you, sir, what happened with Marana and our alleged desert parkway on Silverbell between Ina and Cortaro?
So, sir, on that question, I'm going to have to do some research and get back to you, because that was in play and I wasn't with the town at that time. So I don't know all the nuances and what came into play. I do know that as developments occurred, we have been placing medians in play. So now if you look at north of that intersection, medians do exist now where the Amazon Center is and out in front of that. But beyond that, unless Jennifer, if you have any input, or if not, it's fine. So.
May I?
Sir, you can have, or, yes.
Yeah. I need to talk to you, because I've been in here 32 years, and I don't remember, because my mind gets a little strange these days. I don't remember ever hearing about that. I've been on the council for almost 18 years. That's news to me. So that's why I'm sitting here, sir, trying to think, where are you talking about? So I've got it now. Ina, go south of Ina up to Cortaro?
Between Ina and Cortaro. North of Ina.
Between Ina, Silverbell from Ina to Cortaro is strictly Marana.
Like right
I
here.
mean, we don't have the abutting jurisdictions like we do south of Ina.
Okay, so south of Ina,
Past the
most of,
QT.
So,
okay.
sir, let's table this so we can get back to the discussion on the RCE grant. But, you know, I know as part of that, it was a four-lane roadway, I don't know if divided, and I believe you're saying desert parkway. I think you're maybe talking about the median. Sometimes medians are placed, not placed for reasons I'm just not sure why the design was, you know, why it went forward in that fashion.
Well, and I can talk with you after too. We did have a 404 permit with that, where we had a lot of mitigation on site due to the pygmy owl, and that changed a lot of our design on that project. So I can talk with you afterward about, because we had 5 years of monitoring to comply with the Corps and things like that. So since that's independent of the Cortaro project, I will get with you afterwards and we can talk some more about the history, because I've been here since 2001, so I lived that project. So I can help you out with that one, but.
So yes, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I have a couple questions. Well, since we're in the early stages, who made the decision that it would be an overpass?
So again, this is an ADOT facility, so they've done those type of studies in the past. And currently this is identified in a document from 2014 where they looked at different type of alternatives. They even looked at a no build. They even looked at, can they do something on the surface roadways around that to help mitigate the issue, and a few other elements. But so it was part of that document that landed on having it as an overpass for the TI.
So ADOT believed that was the best way to go?
Correct.
Okay. Second of all, you're talking 2027 to 2032 possibility of getting this done. In the meantime, because we're waiting 15, 20 minutes every morning when we go to work at that crossing to get from the east side onto the freeway to I-10, we can't make a U-turn because the trains are going one way and then they're coming the other way. Can you remove some of that, those trees on the meridian and make a U-turn so we can turn if we're gonna have to wait 10 years? To make it more easier for us to get out of the lane. We get stuck. You can't move because we have a really nice meridian between the 4 lanes.
Oh, the median between on Cortaro. Okay,
Correct.
sorry.
So if we can remove that and make a U-turn so we can turn before we get to the railroad, if we're gonna have to wait another 10 years, this place is already, so it's jam-packed. If we have an alternative, because we might wait 8 to 10 years for this to be built, can we do something in the meantime so that we have a resource to be able to get out of a predicament that we can't get to work on time?
So I see Dion is actively taking notes. So again, what you're asking is obviously a highly traffic engineering element, but she is taking the notes. So that's what we've been doing with these meetings. Some ideas that are introduced, we're making sure to document those and have those.
Well, just so you know, they took the trees down so you could get into Dutch Brothers. So my favorite place to go get something to drink, but in the meantime,
I haven't heard many complaints about getting into Dutch Brothers.
Absolutely not. We'd like to get out of the jam.
So just to add on to that though, it's especially true if the trains are stopped or slow and you are stuck.
Yeah.
Correct. No, so I appreciate the discussion coming back to the railroad, because keep in mind, that is exactly what we are asking for here. And as part of the survey, we ask that you fill that out and also submit your comments to us. And we will, what that does is that bolsters our chances of pursuing and being successful getting this grant. When Heidi mentioned these are very highly competitive, we're talking about a 10 to 15% success rate. They are very, very highly competitive. And I know the next question might be, well, what happens if you don't get it? We'll probably be here again next year with talking to you and saying we're putting our best efforts. But we honestly and truly are. We're putting our best efforts forward. We're utilizing the assistance of consultants to help throw together the best package we can. And we're trying to check every box that we can to help get the funding that obviously put a lot of these into motion of what we need to do before we even get to construction. 1 second. Ma'am, you said you had another question, or did that cover you?
That covered me.
Okay.
Just a curiosity.
There's one behind you. Yes, sir.
Is the RCE grant an annual grant? So if you look at this year, would you be able to reapply for the following year?
So it has been an annual grant, or at least what we've seen. I haven't done extensive research. And you bring up another point that we haven't discussed is there's a thing called a NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability. That was supposed to be due out in September, late September. We have yet to see it come out yet. And that's when they actually say this grant is available, you can submit for it. There's many things happening on a global scale and also at a national scale that probably is impacting that. As you know, there was the shutdown or potential shutdown of the federal government. All those things play into these type of things when we're going for federal money. All that being said, we are using the previous, so that it was from last year, as kind of a template, because we don't expect that it's going to change too much from year to year. But yes, has been traditionally offered year over year.
Can I have one more question?
Yes.
Does UPI or Union Pacific Railroad, do they have funding for things like this?
I'm not sure if they specifically have funding, but again, this is from FRA, so They are private, but this is coming from the Federal Rail Administration.
It benefits them too, so.
It does benefit them, because what we're doing is we're eliminating a conflict between our vehicles and their trains. And so, yeah, it benefits all parties. And they would definitely be part of this project, you know, at the time that it moves forward. Yes, sir. You got it.
Two quick questions. Is there funding available for you guys to get started on semi-detailed preliminary planning? Can you have monies available now? Or you literally have to wait until the second version of RTA before you put pencil to paper?
So we are pursuing this grant now in the hopes of moving on that. So regardless of RTA, we're moving independently, again, with the planning efforts, the archaeological, the environmental, hopefully design, with the intent to be ready to go with construction. So shovel ready by the time RTA kicks in. That's a lot of ifs, and that's a lot of things that need to fall into place. But yes, we are working towards that. But we don't have the funding, like the 10 million we have from the state, it just doesn't get you as far as you would need to go to do those. So it's better for us to utilize that fund to try to flip it into 50 million instead of the 10.
And the last question, I'll shut up then. Just curiosity, why didn't ADOT look at Cortaro before, for example, Ruth Roth? I mean, Ruth Roth's great, but it's not exactly a high traffic road, right?
Well, I know.
I mean, Cortaro got to be 10 times the volume.
Yeah.
Did they think it was a little too difficult or challenging and leave it for the next guy?
So I'll preface this with, I don't work for ADOT, and so I'm not gonna, don't take anything as far as talking about ADOT, but you gotta remember, they are looking at the entire state network. And when they do those, they also look at the impacts, the needs of particular areas. And it wasn't until, we'll call it relatively recently in the scale of things, that Marana is really growing. And while we are out there and we're beating the drum saying, hey, we need this infrastructure, when they look at their papers and all of their plans and their long-range plans, we probably weren't coming up to the level that was highlighted to them. We live here, we see the problems, but for them, they're looking at the entire state. And so they're looking at the problems up in Maricopa County, obviously. But so again, I'm just trying to give you my thought is what their thought process was, but beyond that, I can't speak for you.
I'm just curious, because with Ruth Roth, they just had to tear down 2 small buildings, throw a straight bridge over the top, boom, done.
Yeah. Who's
Yes,
writing
sir.
the grant?
I just wondered if there's any communication with the railroad, so they don't run the trains through there during rush hours, and do they cooperate at all, or just, that's it?
Sir, they're a government entity that they have powers that the state can't usually, so we can't dictate when they're gonna run. They
Right.
dictate when they're gonna
Yeah,
run.
they won't even talk to you, it's just, we run our trains, we run them, and that's it.
When it comes to their operations, they control, but you gotta remember too, they're working on logistics.
Right.
So we would say, oh, it'd be great if you could not run your trains or run them between 9 and 3.
Right.
But they're taking products that you and I utilize and everybody else here, and they're going across the entire nation. So they need to get from point A to point B at a certain time. And it doesn't, their time dictates us, not us driving to work, so.
The new normal for the trains are 2 miles long.
Oh, yeah.
So, ma'am, over here.
Between now and when this happens, are there any plans to widen Ina from Silver Bell to Wade?
I know from Silver Bell to Wade.
Yeah, because Cortaro comes right into Ina, so I picture a lot of people using that to get around all this.
Oh, you're talking further west, out in the county, I believe is the area you're talking about.
That is county area.
Yeah, you're talking out in the county's jurisdiction, ma'am, no, I don't know.
Silver Bell, Ina to Silver Bell to Wade?
Well, I know the Silver Bell's been widened.
That's right where I live.
No, Ina, I'm sorry.
It's county.
From Silver Bell on Ina up to Wade.
But if you look at Wade, the Town of Marana sign is just east of Cortaro, of Ina. So that is.
If you go back to your map.
Right there.
See the triangle right there? See that triangle? Ina goes up to Wade. That triangle right in there. I live on that triangle, right in that triangle on Wade, Ina. And I'm just wondering if Ina's gonna be widened.
So the area you're talking about of Ina is out of our jurisdiction now. Ina's been widened throughout the town limits to 4 lanes.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're talking about, because we're currently 4-lane divided. Ina, but our limits is just basically Silver Bell, a little bit west of there, and then east to the river, basically, to the wash. Yes, ma'am.
So in the meantime, obviously, we can't force them to give us this project. But in the meantime, is there anybody I don't know who's responsible for the intersection, but the intersection at Cortaro and I-10, not the freeway, the lights are timed extremely well.
Yeah, thank you.
So is there something that somebody can, I don't know if that's Marana's jurisdiction or Pima County's or ADOT, but besides the trains, we can't change the fact that the trains are coming through, we can't change the fact that we have what we have. But I mean, I've lived there since 2004, and it's been nothing but duct taped and tweaker rigged since I've lived there. And, you know, I grew up in Phoenix, where I'm used to timing and engineering, design, making sure that you go the speed limit, you're gonna make the road. Well, of course, we can't fix what the railroad is doing, but those lights, you sit there at the light going west on Cortaro. And you're sitting at that light right before you go to the left-hand turn lane to turn left onto the southbound, which is technically the eastbound I-10. You sit there, and there's a green light getting onto the freeway, and everybody's sitting there staring at this green light, and nobody can go through.
So Dion is taking notes again. Just for clarity in everybody's education, all of that infrastructure that you mentioned, so the interstate, the frontage road, those signals on either side are ADOT's jurisdiction. So they're not controlled by the town of Marana, but we do have a working relationship with them. And I know Dion is taking notes, and she's going to talk with her counterpart on a lot of these items that come up.
So you're saying that and I don't know if they have names or whatever, but you know, there's you know which lights I'm talking about.
The off ramp and the lights that you're coming to in that signal. So on either side of the interstate.
Just the light right just west of the train tracks, and then even on the other side, when you've got the light trying to get on the freeway, that light's just green and nobody's going through anything. It's just this
Well,
big
if there's a
intersection.
train stuck there,
It doesn't even matter if the
and you
train's there
can't
or not.
turn,
Yeah.
you're sitting in traffic for 20 minutes and you can't move because, you know, like the lights turn as red. They just link that to the train and let the people turn to go west on I-10 or east.
Yeah. We've received that concern. We are aware. Again, that is an ADOT infrastructure there. But thank you for bringing that up. Yes, ma'am. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay, but that
There's-
light that she's talking about, when you go through it, and you finally get to the point where you can turn, it's
Yeah, you
red.
can turn.
Yeah.
And then you can turn, and then you have to fix some
Then all
more.
the people run that light because they've been sitting for so long that they're all angry. And now when you're trying in that double left turn lane to get onto the I-10, nobody will let you through because they've all ran their light, whether it be
Yeah.
eastbound traffic or the people coming off the
Happens all the
interchange.
time.
They're all ran that light and you're sitting in the two double turn lanes and now nobody can move for that spot that's been wide open for probably 3 or 4 minutes. So, I mean, I contact ADOT regularly.
So we are aware of the challenges, and I'll be honest, we're seeing some impacts as far away as Cortaro beyond, because obviously they're doing work to the south. And that is rerouting people throughout our jurisdiction so you have some people going directions they may not, normally go, but obviously going to the south is a little bit difficult right now. Yes, ma'am, you had a question?
I want to ask you said alternate routes. That Thornyville Road, how far south does that go? As an alternate route? I'm just
Orange
curious.
Grove. It turns into the river at Orange Grove.
Yep.
Correct.
Okay, that's right.
And that's close.
Never mind.
So to put it in the context,
Ran all the way out, like, yeah.
If only.
that would be great.
I forgot.
Unfortunately, we don't have a parallel road along the interstate like that other than the frontage. To put it in the context, when we're talking about alternates, we were talking specifically to get around the area where the impacts would be for the Cortaro traffic interchange. So we were looking at ways and we were just trying to highlight that we are in a better situation than we were when we took Ina offline and having other options to be able to continue to make it from one side of the interstate to the other. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Fausto, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the RCE grant. And I didn't hear a timeline, first of all, for that. Is that 2
There-
months out, 4 months out, 5 months out?
There's the NOFA that we are still waiting for. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a notice of funding availability, and we have yet to see that come out. It was due out late September, and we're still waiting.
So it hasn't even been released yet?
Correct.
Okay, so sounds like, do we know what the criteria is going to be on that grant? Because
We
it
have
sounds
an
like we've
idea.
only got one shot at it, and I don't think we've ever done an RC grant unless, it sounds like we haven't done an RC grant.
Correct. I don't think we have. Again, we're using last year's as a template, as an idea of what they're going to ask, because usually they don't really change on these type of large-scale grants
So
that are
last
dedicated to
year's-
this. We're looking at last year's as an idea of what we need to do, so that's where we're having the boxes. And also Heidi and Dion have been sitting in several webinars of what's called a boot camp, and they've been attending those for several months, that they're specifically telling you what you need to do.
Okay.
And our understanding is it is very much verbatim of last year's
Okay,
rendition of
You
it.
say last year's, not ours, but whatever they put out.
The
last
grant that
year.
was available last year, it looks like it's going to be very similar this year,
Okay,
based
well, I'm
on the
glad to
meetings.
hear
they've had.
that they're doing that, because
Correct.
if this is a one-time shot, we want to do our best, which I'm sure we will. And-
We're hoping it's a one-time shot. We will actively pursue it again if we need to, but we're doing the best we can to make sure it's a one-time shot.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes?
Real quick, this may be a Mayor Ed issue or a Terry Rosma issue, but do you know if they're working with Juan Ciscaloni, our local congressman who's very supportive of Marana, on getting federal funding for this thing and helping with the grant process maybe, or getting on the other end of that, on the funding end of it?
That would be a question for them. I know, our legislatures have been very active, and that's what we received the 10 million from.
Right.
But that's the state
We need
level.
federal help.
You're talking about a little bit different level.
Yeah.
And that, I'm not sure, but when we do get to the point of throwing together a grant application, I'm sure we're gonna pull every lever we can and get support from all levels, including legislature.
Yeah, good.
I think I speak for just about everybody that we want it done. I avoid that intersection at all costs,
And which ways do you travel?
Right.
Which ways do you travel if you're avoiding it and you're heading north?
I'll go to Twin Peaks if I'm,
Correct.
or I go to Ina.
Correct.
Even with the construction, where they have Orange Grove closed now, and Ina and Thornydale are a mess.
Yeah.
It's better to go Ina than to sit at the railroad tracks.
So you do highlight some of the options, and when we mentioned about alternatives, because we've heard this in previous, and we know, we've all driven that and done that same movement. So you can make a big U-turn if you go south to Ina and flip around, or if you're heading north, you can go to Silver Bell, Twin Peaks.
I don't even go to the stores on Cortaro if I don't have to, because I don't want to sit up there and traffic.
Well, I appreciate that information, but our hopes is once this project comes to a point where it's complete, it's gonna be a huge benefit for all the commerce in the area, because obviously what you want as a store owner is for people to be able to get in and to get out, and with the least amount of inconvenience. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So who made the decision on going back to the Cortaro, by the railroad tracks and stuff, to change the design on the intersection there? Because the way that it was before and what it is now, it was easier to get kind of through than what it is now. Now it seems like you're stuck in 2 lanes. You can't get into the 3rd lanes and the inside turning lanes and stuff and everything on there.
So
It
that
used to be a
was-
whole lot easier before, so I don't know who made that decision.
So I think when you're talking about changes in design, you're talking about the striping changes that occurred underneath the interstate. I'll be honest, that is actually something that the Town of Marana, in partnership with ADOT, because again, that is their infrastructure, we looked at. We asked them with some concepts. We said, hey, because one thing we were asking them to see what we could do to optimize this. Obviously, there's a train comes into play, all bets are off. But while in some instances, you may be able to travel through a little more conveniently. What it does with the operations that currently exist, you're able to have concurrent flow in the east-west traffic. So you're able to have Cortaro Road going eastbound and westbound at the same time. The way it was set up before, you could only go one direction at any given time. It's called a split phasing. So you were only able to go through the frontage road, then you're only able to go east, then you're only able to go north or west, if you will, and then you're only able to go west on Cortaro, while the other movements sit and watch the other movements. They did do extensive modeling, and they, based on what they came back with, they said that would be optimizing that. And I believe we have seen the amount of throughput actually does increase. Destination travels increase, or not increased, but improved, and some of the rate of speeds have increased some. Just something that we use as metrics to tell us if it's working or not. And beyond that, I will defer to Dion to give you more specific details.
Because it's not working.
I would like to personally say I think it's improved completely with the way the lines work. Are they talking about westbound after the I-10?
Yeah.
That's so much better than it was before. Those lines make everybody merge better, and nobody's like turning from one. I personally think that's a huge improvement. So, I mean, it's the only, how much can Marana do, but in my opinion, I found that to be a big improvement, and more efficient than what we had before.
I appreciate the input from both parties. I know we've heard actually both sides of the fence. It is difficult. It is a challenging area. We're trying to, the throughput, it's quite a bit of traffic volume that we're trying to push through the area. And there's also a train that obviously can come in and at times come in one direction and follow with another. So those are all the challenges that we have there. And when I say we, it's not only us, it's ADOT, but again, they have been good partners in this. Any other questions? Concerns? Something you haven't thought of? Thank you, everybody.